Unforbidden truth.
Welcome to Unforbidden Truth. I'm Andrew. This is part 2 of my interview with convicted Ohio double murderer Victoria Drain. So let's talk about that second murder that took place. You're convicted of the murder of fellow inmate Christopher Richardson, in which you received the death penalty for. Can you walk me through everything that led up to the murder of Christopher, what happened, and what the aftermath was?
Yeah, so I got to the RTU, like I said, a mental hospital. For gender, they were considering my hormones at the time for transitioning and trying to stabilize me on other meds from some self-harm incidents. So I get to the RTU, and like RTUs in this state, especially the high security ones, it's a small circuit. So you're gonna know most. Like if you've been in one RTU, in most, you're gonna know half the people in all of them. There's only 3 of them for all the high security, so we all know each other. So when I got there, I knew a lot of people there. And when I moved upstairs, they moved me in a single person cell. And like my very, very first day there, somebody I knew. Like I was talking to somebody I knew, and we were talking to each other, and they were like, the dude next to you is such and such. It was an inmate that I knew that was a serial child molester. And I know this sounds like I'm on some conspiracy theory shit, but for real, because of my past incidents, I feel like DRC knew that they know that I don't do well when I'm housed right next to child molesters. It ends up with some kind of stabbing or something like that. So when they did that, I was thinking in my head, like, I felt like they wanted me to do something, but at the same time, it's something in my head. If you put me next to one and I know the person is one, not somebody said they are, but I know for a fact this is a serial child molester, and you put me right next to him, it's just going to be an issue. So as soon as they did that, I'm thinking, like, all right, like, I'm about to, this ain't going to work out. You know what I mean? I'm about to do something to this motherfucker if they don't, So, hold on one sec. Huh? No, I'm good. I don't want to. Yeah. All right. I'm sorry about that. So, anyway, they housed me right next to a child molester. So my plan in my head was, look, like a day or two later, they moved the child molester downstairs. Like, I feel nobody said nothing. I just think that they finally, the paperwork caught up and they realized it wasn't a good idea to house me right next to this individual. So they put him downstairs next to this Christopher Richardson guy, and who had approached me a couple times, just casual conversation, like, hey, my name's Chris, which I didn't know him before I came here. This is one inmate I didn't know. So he had approached me. We had talked a couple times. He was pretty cool or whatever. And then that's when I started in my head. I'm like, hey, I told him, I'm like, hey, that dude next to you, which was the child molester, I'm like, I got a problem with him from another prison. If maybe one day you can get him in your cell, and so I can go talk to him and slide in your cell, because he was on the bottom range, right, literally next door to him. But my plan in my head was just to have Christopher set him up into his cell, and then I was just gonna go kill the child molester in his cell. You know what I mean? So, and then so we talked about it a few different times, and then every time we talked, I actually started trusting him. Like, maybe he would set this dude up. I wouldn't have to lie to him to set him up. Maybe he would just straight up set him up, which he had pretty much went along with the whole thing up until. So I was there 3 weeks when this happened. So this is probably 2.5 weeks into it. He comes up to me, and he's like, I've been thinking of what you're saying, and, I know you don't like him because he's a child molester, but you're a murderer, and child molesters and murderers are both pretty much, the same in God's eyes, and all this weird shit he was saying to me. And that shit just, I don't know. I was like, all right. I was like, no, I respect that. You know what I mean? Like, okay, I understand. Like, but then I went back up to my cell, and I'm thinking, all he's got to do, and it's a Friday on top of this, another Friday, the 13th, and he's like, I'm thinking in my head, like, all he's got to do is tell his fucking mental health person or the doctor, and I'm back at Lucasville just for even thinking about doing it, not even just doing it. Or number two could happen, and he could go tell the child molester that I was plotting on him, and then he could try to hit me when I'm not even looking or some shit. You know what I mean? So it's just too much. I didn't like the vibe, the feeling in my head about what could possibly, like, the two options of what he could do. The way he was acting, I could tell he was going to either snitch or do something crazy, like back out and fucking tell the dude to watch his back or whatever, and then put a mark on my back. So literally, when the doors pop for lunch, I tell him, like, look, at dinner time, come up to my cell. I ain't no hard feelings. We'll just smoke this joint together or whatever. Just so he's like, all right. So dinner comes around. Oh, wow, during count, I'm like moving all the shit up under my bunk and shit, so there ain't nothing he can grab, like nothing he can grab or nothing like that. So then, like, so I got my cell pretty much on point, and then I invite him up, and he comes up, and when he fucking came in and shit, I'm like, I gave him the batteries, because that's how you light cigarettes, joints and cigarettes, whatever, in prison. You gotta touch the two metals on the sink. So he bent down to do that, and I just hit him in the head with a fan motor. He, like, dropped to one knee and looked up at me, and then I just hit him again, literally, like tore his fucking ear off, basically, and just started bashing his head in. And then I took a pencil, jammed it in his eye, and stomped it into his eye, and then stomped his throat. Till I thought he stopped breathing, but he did survive, though. But I walked out, so, like, he's just laying there or whatever, fucked up, and I, like, took the blood off my shoes with like a sheet, and then threw it on top of him, and then just walked out. I put a hoodie on, walked out. And then the police were doing their rounds. I guess I still had blood on the bottom of my shoe because they followed the bloody shoe print up to my cell. And when they opened the flap to look inside, that's when all hell broke loose. They hit the man down and all that shit.
So what exactly happened from there on out after they...
Go ahead.
Oh, after they realized that you had just killed this inmate.
So after they realized, well, they didn't know at first. They thought it was me. They didn't know who that was laying there because they couldn't really recognize the inmate because of the damage to him. So they locked everybody down. Obviously, I'm the only one there, so, like, they surround me. I get on my knees. They put the cuffs on. They take me out, and, like, they're, like, asking me, like, what's going on? Like, who is? And I'm like, I don't know. I ain't telling them their name. So they finally figure out it's Richardson. Ambulance is on the way, all that. So they put me in, like, a strip cell in the hole, and they're telling me, like, you know, the highway patrol is going to come interview you. And so, like, an hour later, the highway patrol is there asking me all these questions. I don't lie to them. I said, yeah, I tried to kill him. I didn't know if he was dead or not. So, yeah, I said, yeah, I killed his ass, whatever. So they brought me straight here. I've been here ever since. But so, like I did, like, an hour interview, just explaining everything I just told you. I told them I ain't sugarcoat shit. I ain't try to hide shit. They just brought me here, and then I started going through the pretrial. You know, well, so that happened in April. I got indicted in August of 2019, and found out they were seeking the death penalty. And I pled no contest the following year in 2020, and in May 2020 they sentenced me to death.
How did you feel when you were handing down that death sentence?
I'll be honest, I didn't even care, man. I didn't care. I didn't even try to go to trial. I just pled no contest. I didn't say I wanted the death penalty, but I didn't say I wanted life. I told the judge straight up, like, I'm not asking you for life or death. It's up to you. You hear the facts and you decide. And once they made their decision, like I said, December this year will be 7 years in solitary. You know what I mean? Like, who cares? Like, being executed or doing 15, 20 years in solitary and dying anyway in prison, I didn't care. I really didn't give a shit at all.
Being that you're on death row, how does the appeal process work, and how has the appeal process been going for you?
So when you get the death penalty, your case automatic. You get three actual appeals. I mean, you could get more. There's loopholes and everything, obviously, but so your first appeal is called a direct review, and that goes straight to the the state Supreme Court. In my case, it'd be Ohio Supreme Court. And what they do is they independently review your crime, your past, like your mitigating and your aggravating circumstances, and so all 7 of the state justices independently weigh and make sure that, in their opinion, that the court gave you a proportionate sentence, that you deserve a death sentence, basically. And so that's like an automatic. Some people call it an automatic appeal. Some call it a direct review. Either way, it's pretty much, they say it's like it's not something you can waive. It's not like any other one you can just say, I'm not doing it or not waive it. But the direct review is a little bit more difficult. There is ways. I've read case law where people have managed to do it before. But on my appeal, I got assigned some really amazing public defenders that I really ended up trusting, and I do trust them still to this day. But so I ended up going through with the first direct review. So I got sentenced in May 2020, October 2022. The Ohio Supreme Court upheld my death sentence and my conviction 6-1. But one person dissented, 6 agreed with my death sentence. So when that happens, they set your execution date at that moment. But you can automatically stay it because you would have a post-conviction in the trial court that sentenced you and a habeas corpus in federal court after you lose that. So those two aren't, the appeals after that direct review aren't, they're not mandatory. So all you have to do is go and, so in my case right now, I'm about to waive my appeals, which basically means that it will lift the stay, because when they set that execution date, they stay it because you have other appeals until those are exhausted. And that's where I'm at right now. So I had made the decision to waive my appeals because recently I just got another 10 plus years in solitary, which means between realistically 12 and 15 years, because it's not 12 plus non-presumptive means indefinite. They just can't say indefinite because it got deemed cruel and unusual to say indefinite. So they changed it to non-presumptive. So basically saying that in 12 to 15 years we'll start considering to let you go to regular death row, which there's out of the 128 death row inmates, I think there is in Ohio 132. There's 8 of us here in Supermax, and I'm literally in my cell all day, 24/7. I get outside by myself, Mondays and Fridays, for an hour. But it's been 7 years in December. Then you add that on, it'll be 20 years of solitary just to get the regular death row where you're still super restricted. And I'm not saying I don't understand the whole thing, but what I'm saying is I'm not doing that. So what I chose to do is I wrote the judge a letter a month ago, and I told him I've decided to waive all post-conviction and appeals in trial court. So by doing that, essentially you waive all your appeals, because if you don't do your state court, you can't do your federal court. So when you waive your state, you're also waiving federal and everything, other review of your case, which will mean that this Ohio State Supreme Court will reset my execution date, and this time I won't be able to stay it. It'll just, the time will run its course, and if they have the drugs to do it at the time that date comes, then you basically ain't got no challenges to stop it, basically. So my court date is this next week on the 17th to put it on record, and once I put it on record on the 17th, it'll close my docket off the case docket, take my case off, end all discovery, and I will no longer have appeals to my case.
So what makes you 100% certain that you want to go through with that?
Because I've weighed every option. Like, my options are only one of two things. I'm going to have an execution date within the next 3 or 4 years where I can, to me, it's a way out. I mean, it's not like suicide. It's not like, this is what they sentenced me to. They didn't sentence me to, if this is my sentence, then I'm like, carried out. Do it, because what am I going to sit in solitary another 20 years? There's not a version of myself or any way of thinking in my head that makes me want to spend 20 years in solitary to potentially get executed anyway. There's a good chance I'll get executed anyway. Just I'll be older, more fucked up in my head, more family members dead or not around anymore. You know what I mean? Like, right now, I feel like if I make this decision and I got time to get my sit and spend time with the people I care about. Spend that time building with them. And that's it. This is my sentence. I didn't sentence me to death. I could kill myself whenever I want. That ain't what I want to do. But they sentenced me to death. Carry that shit out. If they didn't want to do that, they could have gave me life. Then I would sit in here another 20 years. Or 30 years before I go to, regular prison.
So, can we talk about your transition in prison?
Yeah.
So, when did you first transition, and when did you know that you wanted to transition?
I finally was able to start hormones in July of 2021. I've fought the state since January 2011 to get hormones. I've had 2 lawsuits. I've been through literally every scenario a person could probably think of in prison that a trans person can go through, both with inmates and staff. I've been through it, and I honestly, there was times where I thought I'd never get it, but eventually I did. I've had multiple attempts to, like self-harm. I've been physically violent with people. People's been physically violent with me, mostly COs and staff while I'm in handcuffs, cheek shots and shit. But at the end of the day, I put in a lot of work. It took me 10 years of, when you could put your finger on any date in the last 10 years between 2011 and 2021, and I was fighting at some level for hormones or for my transition. Whether it was against the police, whether I was in the hole being starved out, whether I was being whatever, it was something. It was never me just sitting complacent. And eventually, I was on death row. I honestly believe if I never would have got the death penalty, I still would be fighting for hormones. If I would have got a life sentence in Warren County, I still wouldn't have a platform. I still wouldn't have gotten no way to get, nobody would have heard. Once I got the death penalty, advocates were coming out all over the place to try to do shit. But I'm like, what the fuck? I'm on death row. Like, where were you in? I'm grateful that I got hormones and I'm transitioning. But what about the other 20 motherfuckers that's just like me right now in Ohio that have life and nobody thinks about? So, like, I'm grateful, but at the same time, it took me to get sitting on death row or I never would have had it.
So, can you break down how it works in Ohio Department of Corrections when it comes to transitioning? Are they required to pay for medical procedures, or is it subject to what one sentence is?
Well, so the way the policy is written and what really happens are two separate things, but I'll just break it down. The way the policy is written is there's no blanket policy. Everybody's treated as an individual, blah, blah, blah. But in reality, if you come into prison without any hormones, which, let's be real, if you're on the street and you're living like that one type of life, you're not going to have insurance, you're not going to have, the things that some other people might be able to do to be able to transition. It's hard for people to transition on the street, money, financially, and for other reasons. If you don't have a place to stay, where you just got the joint, you ain't even got no job, nowhere. Transitioning is a priority, but you got to have a place to live to do any of that. So, I mean, it's not as easy as people think. People be like, oh, you came to the joint and then you wanted to transition. No, man, you don't. they don't. It's not like what you think. Like what people are saying ain't the way it is. Like you come to prison and you get out of prison and you want to transition, but you can't do shit because you ain't even got a job, you ain't got housing, you ain't got insurance, you ain't got shit. So when you do come to prison and you are not already on hormones, then it's hell. It's not easy. It's not what people are saying or think, where you can just say, hey, I got gender dysphoria, and they throw you hormones. That's not what happens. It literally, they'll fight you tooth and nail. First of all, they hate giving out the diagnosis gender dysphoria, because once they give that diagnosis, then they're obligated to treat it. So 9 times out of 10, the biggest fight is getting that diagnosis that you have to even get any treatment. So you have to be labeled mentally ill in prison to get hormones. You have to be suffering from gender dysphoria to be able to transition. So that's the hard part. But if you are on hormones when you come to prison, they'll continue them when you get here. It's just so very few trans women in prison came in with a legit prescription. They might have been transitioning, like getting shit off the street or however they were getting the hormones. But if they didn't have a doctor's prescription and a note and all this other shit, then you're going to do at least a 5-10 year, not even 5, you're going to do like an 8 to 10 year battle with the state. You're going to have to file lawsuits, all this shit just to get it. But once you get it, they pay for the hormones, yes. As far as like surgery, like bottom surgery and all that, it happens very rarely. I'm pretty sure it's never happened in Ohio prison, but I know some states recently have offered that. But also, like in Ohio, from what I know is that you're going to be housed at a male facility as long as you're, if you have, they go by your genitals basically. So it ain't no like transitioning females that haven't had bottom surgery that I know of at Marysville. That's what I'm told. I've never seen that. Maybe there might be one or that's somewhere, but not in Ohio that I know of. So that's basically what it is. And then like when you do get on the hormones, it's still a whole nother game because they might just keep you at the lowest dose possible. I have finally got on the right dose right now, but like I said, it took a lot of work, a lot of fucked up shit, and it was hard to come by, to say the least. When you're trans in prison, there's something that you need to remember is there's so many, there's really no allies. You can't go to the chapel because the chaplain thinks you're a sinner. The police are out to fuck with you. You can't trust anybody. You're like, it's a whole different aspect of prison. And so when people think that trans women in prison, trans men also, I'm sure I've not experienced that, but I'm saying trans women in male facilities is to just be trans in prison is it's difficult. If you got to be built a certain type of way to be able to thrive in this environment. Like for every solid, strong trans woman in prison, there's 5 or 10 they're just getting eaten alive, and it sucks when you watch it. But like you really gotta. It's just a different spin on it. It really isn't. People aren't lining up. One of the things they say is like, well, if we give you hormones, we'll have to give every trans person hormones. Motherfuckers ain't coming out and trans in a male facility unless they're graveyard serious about transitioning, because you're putting the biggest bullseye on your forehead that you can imagine. So if somebody's asking for hormones in prison, then they're dead ass serious about transitioning.
So if you had to inform the public on anything, what might that be? And that could be whether that be transitioning, about yourself, or about prison, anything in general.
I just think that the main thing for me is like when I feel like I'm 100% responsible for everything I've done. Period. Point blank. I know that. And when I say shit like, if you look at the big picture from the very beginning of the system, going in the system to now, like when I explained, I said something like a statement before I got sentenced, and they in my sentencing order said I took responsibility, but then turned around and blamed the system. But that's not what I do. What I say is I take responsibility, but there's a bigger picture. I got thrown into the system. If you go to DYS right now and you look how the blocks are set up, you look how the fences are set up, you look how the staff is set up. It's you when you're a kid. It's a prison. You're in prison. It's no different. You could look at fucking Tico or Cuyahoga Hills and then look at Marion or Mansfield as an adult, and it's the same. So, like, the system was designed for a specific reason. And, yes, I'm responsible for my actions, but also people also have to take responsibility for their actions and how the joint ain't what you see on TV. This shit crooked as fuck. Everybody knows it out there. You could change a word, like solitary is now called ER, extended restrictive housing, but it's still solitary. They don't say the word indefinite. Now they say non-presumptive. It's still the same shit that it was in the 90s. The only difference is they changed words to keep people asleep out there. And you got to know that people don't just wake up wanting to kill shit. I mean, there's those handful of people that enjoy just killing shit all the time, or they got that bloodthirsty shit in them. But the system creates a fucking a type of individual, and it punishes them for being that individual later in life. Whether it's the death penalty or more jail time or not, when they get out, the type of shit convicts gotta go through. So I think people really need to look at that, because some people, I was a normal person. I mean, I even know I ain't normal now. But I did have a normal streak. I mean, I was doing little petty bullshit, and they just straight up threw me in solitary for years as a kid, knowing what that would do. I didn't know what that would do, but they definitely knew what that would do.
So as a death row inmate, how do you feel about the death penalty?
Okay, so that's like how I feel about the death penalty is, I mean, it's just super simple. Like, do you rape a rapist, right? When somebody rapes a kid, is their punishment rape to rape them? If you kill somebody for killing somebody, to prove to the world that killing people is wrong, it just sounds stupid. Even me saying it just now sounds dumb as fuck. Like, you're gonna do to me what I did to somebody else to show everybody that that's fucking wrong, or deter crime. How's that working out? And then think about the death penalty. Go look at the statistics on school shooters and mass shooters and how many of them are sitting on death row. Not that I would even think about it. I'm just not saying that I want them on death row. What I'm saying is it's not applied evenly. Doesn't even make sense. It's like playing a game of dice, man. Who gets the death penalty? Most of the time it's going to be a person of color with a white victim. That's a fact. You can look at the statistics all across the board. If you're a person of color and you have a white victim, your odds of getting the death penalty are so much higher. I don't even have to. You can look that up. That's facts. But also, like, all it matters is the county. There's multiple prisons in Ohio. If I would have done the same thing I would have got life without. They wouldn't even have put the death penalty on the table. There's only a handful of counties. It's all about the prosecutor. So when you're putting that much power in the prosecutor's hand, then it's really not equally applied justice. It's just the certain opinion of the prosecutor in the county you kill somebody at. So I think it's just fucking stupid. I mean, as a whole, it doesn't make sense. If you were going to kill somebody for killing somebody, then say that. Say, like, look, this isn't about justice. This is revenge. We're doing, just like I said, why I killed Randy. Because he pissed me off. Say it's revenge. Say what it is. But they don't do that. So I think it's dumb. Unless they want to start raping rapists, then that'd be the same shit, eye for an eye.
Do you ever have nightmares about either murder?
No, I've never dreamed about the murders.
So how do you spend your time in prison these days?
I read, I talk to my fiance, I write poetry, I got a little circle of people, like that I talk to on a daily basis. I got kids, I got my daughter down in Florida I talk to. So, I mean, I stay busy for being in the cell. I work out. I got a little workout routine, watch TV. I'm just in my cell all day, that's all.
So you mentioned being in solitary confinement. How are you treated by other prisoners back there?
Well, this is a whole different. So, like at Lucasville, there's bars. You can communicate. Back here, you could yell through the vents, but really, there's no way to. I can't go to rec with nobody. I'm the only death row inmate in this block. I go out to rec by myself. There's nobody else in the cage. It's just me. So, like, I don't. There's no room to treat me any type of way. We don't talk. You know what I mean? Like, they'll ask me, the COs will ask me, do I want my tray? I mean, I've gotten into it with the COs before. I did get an attempted murder here last year, which is why they stopped allowing me to go to rec with the regular, non-death row inmates or whatever. But I don't really have exchanges with any of them. I don't talk to other people here because it's literally like there is no contact. So I'm going to get up on my sink and yell and vent to people I've never seen or met,
Before we conclude this interview, is there anything that you'd like to talk about that we haven't covered yet?
Not that I can think of. That's pretty much it.
That was part 2 of my interview with Ohio double murderer Victoria Drain. For extra content, ad-free episodes, and more, head on over to patreon.com/unforbidden truth. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.
Unforbidden.